What if I told you that one of the biggest stories surrounding Alex Eala this year never actually happened? For days, social media exploded with headlines claiming Netflix had signed the young Filipino tennis star for a 7-episode original documentary. The posts spread across Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and fan pages. Some even claimed there was already a multi-million-dollar production deal in place. It sounded believable. After all, Alex Eala had just become one of the fastest rising names in world tennis. Her matches were drawing international attention. Her interviews were reaching millions of viewers. Every tournament seemed to create another viral moment. So when people saw the words Netflix original next to her name, many didn't stop to question it. They simply believed it. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. That Netflix announcement never existed. No official press release. No confirmation from Netflix. No production announcement. Nothing. The entire story was built on a rumor that traveled faster than the truth ever could. And strangely enough, the real story is actually far more impressive than the fake one. Because while Netflix never announced a documentary, something even more unusual was quietly happening behind the scenes. Within roughly a year, several international broadcasters, working completely independently, each decided that Alex Eala's journey deserved its own documentary or feature. Think about that for a second. Not one network, not two, several, and none of them were coordinating with one another. That isn't something you normally see for a player who is only beginning to establish herself on the biggest stage. Which raises an important question. What did these broadcasters see that made them all reach the same conclusion? Because television companies don't spend months producing documentaries simply because an athlete is trending for a few weeks. They invest in stories they believe will matter years from now. And somehow, separate editorial teams looked at Alex Eala and reached almost the exact same decision. That coincidence deserves a closer look. But before we understand why, we need to understand just how quickly Alex Eala's career changed. The rise nobody saw coming only a short time ago, she was viewed as one of tennis's promising young prospects. People respected her talent. Experts believed she had potential. But she was still waiting for that breakthrough moment that would force the entire tennis world to pay attention. Then everything changed. The breakthrough didn't arrive gradually. It arrived almost overnight. Her remarkable run at the Miami Open shocked fans across the globe. She defeated multiple higher-ranked players in succession and proved she could compete against some of the biggest names in women's tennis. Suddenly, analysts weren't asking whether she belonged. They were asking how high she could climb. That performance completely changed the conversation surrounding her career. Instead of being known only inside tennis circles, Alex Eala suddenly became a global sports story. Then came Wimbledon. Another deep run. Another wave of international headlines. Another jump in the world rankings. By the time the tournament ended, she had reached a career-high position among the world's best players, proving Miami wasn't a lucky week. It was the beginning of something much bigger. And that's when something fascinating started happening. Media organizations from different parts of the world weren't just reporting her match results anymore. They wanted to understand the person behind them. Who was this young Filipina changing expectations? How did she reach this level? Why were millions of Filipinos following every match she played? More importantly, could she become the athlete who changes tennis forever in the Philippines? Those aren't questions news articles can fully answer. They're questions that require documentaries. And without waiting for her to win a Grand Slam, without waiting for her career to end, without waiting for history to render its final judgment, multiple broadcasters decided her story was already worth telling. That alone is remarkable. Because most sports documentaries are made after championships, after retirements, after careers are complete. Alex Eala's documentaries began appearing while her journey was still unfolding. That changes the entire meaning behind them. They weren't celebrating the end of a legendary career. They were documenting the beginning of one. And perhaps that's the biggest difference between the fake Netflix rumor and reality. The rumor suggested one company wanted to profit from Alex Eala's popularity. The truth reveals that respected broadcasters, working independently, recognized something much deeper. They believed they were witnessing history in real time. So why did the Netflix rumor feel so believable? Now here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. If the Netflix rumor wasn't real, then why were so many people convinced it could be? The answer has nothing to do with Netflix. It has everything to do with what was already happening behind the scenes. Because while social media was busy sharing fake headlines, respected media organizations were quietly producing something far more meaningful. Not one documentary, not two. Multiple productions, each approaching Alex Eala's story from a completely different angle. That isn't normal. In sports media, documentaries usually come after an athlete has already won multiple championships or retired from competition. Think about the biggest legends in tennis. Most documentaries are made after years of success, when every chapter of the story is already written. Alex Eala's situation was completely different. Her story was still being written. Yet broadcasters believed it was already important enough to preserve. That tells you something. They weren't documenting the end of a career. They believed they were witnessing the beginning of one. The first project, telling the human story, the first major project, came from one of the most respected media organizations covering Philippine sports. Instead of focusing only on match highlights and tournament victories, it explored the person behind the athlete. It looked beyond rankings, beyond trophies, beyond headlines. It asked a much bigger question: how does a young girl from the Philippines reach one of the most competitive sports in the world? The feature traced Alex's journey from childhood, showing the years of discipline, sacrifice, international training, and family support that shaped her career. It wasn't simply telling viewers what she achieved, it explained how those achievements became possible. And that's an important difference, because anyone can report a final score. Very few productions explain everything that happened long before the cameras arrive. This coverage gave fans something they had never truly seen before: the human story. And audiences responded. People weren't only watching because Alex was winning. They were watching because they wanted to understand the person carrying the hopes of an entire nation. But that was only the beginning. The second project, a bigger question soon afterward, coverage from outside the Philippines started asking a very different question. Instead of asking who Alex Eala was, international media asked what Alex Eala could become. That small difference completely changed the conversation. International outlets weren't simply covering another promising tennis player. They were exploring whether she could change the future of Philippine tennis itself. That's a much larger story. Because countries aren't transformed by one victory. They're transformed when one athlete inspires thousands of young people to believe something is possible. And that's exactly what international editors started noticing. Every tournament seemed to attract more Filipino fans. Every victory inspired another generation. Every interview reached audiences far beyond tennis. The story had grown beyond sports. It had become cultural. And when that happens, broadcasters pay attention, because cultural stories often last much longer than sports headlines. The editorial risk nobody talks about: here's the detail almost nobody noticed. This coverage wasn't produced because Alex had already accomplished everything. It happened because experienced journalists believed her biggest achievements might still be ahead. That's an enormous editorial decision. Think about the risk. If her career had suddenly stalled, if the rankings stopped improving, if the breakthrough didn't continue, that coverage could have looked premature. Yet producers moved forward anyway. Why? Because they weren't betting on a single tournament. They were betting on the trajectory. And so far, that decision has looked incredibly smart. Every few months, Alex kept giving the tennis world another reason to pay attention. A breakthrough in Miami, a memorable Wimbledon campaign, a career-high ranking, major matchups against some of the world's biggest stars. Each chapter seemed larger than the last. That's why the international coverage carried so much significance. Instead of celebrating a Finnish champion, it explored the possibility that Alex Eala could become a game-changer, not just for herself, but for an entire country. That wording matters, because calling someone a game-changer isn't about today's ranking. It's about tomorrow's influence. It's about believing one athlete can reshape expectations for future generations. And once that idea entered the conversation, everything changed. The discussion was no longer limited to wins and losses. People started asking much bigger questions. Could Alex inspire more Filipino children to choose tennis? Could sponsors begin investing more heavily in the sport? Could the Philippines eventually become known for producing elite tennis players? Those questions reach far beyond one athlete. They're questions about changing an entire sporting culture. And perhaps that's why multiple broadcasters, working independently, arrived at nearly the same conclusion. They weren't simply covering a talented player. They believed they were documenting the beginning of a movement. Coming back to the rumor, now let's come back to the question that started this entire story. If Netflix never signed Alex Eala, why did so many people believe it? Because sometimes a rumor grows popular not because people want to spread misinformation, but because they're trying to explain something they can already feel. Fans could sense that Alex Eala's career had entered a completely different level. International media attention was increasing. Her matches were becoming headline news. Broadcasters were producing features and documentaries. Global tennis analysts were talking about her future. The world was clearly paying attention. The only mistake was assuming that attention had come from Netflix. In reality, it came from something much more powerful: independent recognition. Think about what happened. No single company coordinated this coverage. No global advertising campaign announced it. No massive studio launched a worldwide rollout. Instead, different editorial teams, working in different countries, reached the same conclusion on their own. That kind of agreement is incredibly rare. Because journalists don't all receive the same assignment. Editors don't copy one another. Every broadcaster decides independently which stories deserve time, money, and production resources. So when multiple organizations invest in telling the story of the same athlete, it usually means they're seeing something much larger than today's results. They're recognizing long-term significance. And that's exactly what happened with Alex Eala. One production focused on her beginnings. Another explored what she could mean for the future of Philippine tennis. Another followed her rapidly evolving journey as her career continued to develop. Different perspectives, different audiences, one athlete. That isn't marketing, that's recognition. Honesty over hype, and here's something even more important. None of this coverage claimed Alex had already achieved everything. In fact, its greatest strength was honesty. It acknowledged that her biggest moments could still be ahead. That's a completely different message from the fake Netflix headline. The rumor told people the story was already complete. The real coverage told viewers the story was only getting started. That's what makes it far more believable. Because sports rarely move in a straight line. Every great athlete experiences setbacks. Every champion loses matches. Every rising star faces moments of doubt. Alex Eala has experienced those moments too. Not every tournament ended with celebrations. Not every match became another unforgettable victory. She also faced difficult losses against some of the world's best players. Those defeats became valuable reminders that developing into an elite tennis player is never a perfect journey. And strangely enough, those setbacks made the story even stronger. Because it wasn't creating a superhero. It was documenting a young athlete learning, adapting, and improving in real time. That's what audiences connect with. Not perfection, progress. The fake Netflix rumor couldn't tell that story. Rumors need certainty. Real coverage embraces uncertainty. It allows viewers to witness the journey before anyone knows how it ends. And perhaps that's why this coverage resonates with so many people. It's not celebrating a finished legend. It's inviting audiences to grow alongside one. What happens next matters more than what already happened, but maybe the biggest story has nothing to do with documentaries at all. Maybe it's about what happens next. Because somewhere in the Philippines today, a young girl is probably picking up a tennis racket for the very first time. She watches Alex Eala competing against the world's best. She watches international outlets telling her story. She realizes someone from her own country can compete on tennis's biggest stages. And suddenly, a dream that once felt impossible starts feeling real. That's how sporting history changes. Not through one championship, not through one viral headline, but through inspiration, through belief, through the courage of one athlete showing an entire generation what's possible. That may ultimately become Alex Eala's greatest achievement. Not a ranking, not a trophy, not even a future Grand Slam title, but opening a door that many believed could never be opened. And that's why the fake Netflix headline completely missed the point. It focused on a deal that never existed. The real story was unfolding in plain sight. Broadcasters weren't chasing a viral trend. They were preserving a historic moment while it was still happening. Years from now, people probably won't remember the fake headline. They won't remember the pages that spread it. But the real coverage will still exist. Future tennis fans will look back on it to understand where everything began. Young Filipino athletes will see proof that someone from their own country dared to dream bigger. Families will replay those stories and remember the moment the world started paying attention. That's something no rumor can create. Because genuine recognition can't be manufactured. It has to be earned. And whether Alex Eala wins one Grand Slam, several Grand Slams, or follows an entirely different path, one fact has already become impossible to ignore. The world's most respected broadcasters didn't wait for history to tell her story. They believed history was already being written. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Sometimes the loudest headlines turn out to be false, while the quietest stories become the ones that last forever. The Netflix rumor will eventually disappear. But the story of Alex Eala's rise is only just beginning.